Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Bridge. Rebecca Thorne is on the show today, and she is a lot of fun. Miranda, James, and Sam sit down with Rebecca, and you got to check out the show notes for links to her social medias and her website. You're going to be quite impressed if you enjoy this conversation and the sound of cozy fantasy, which is what she writes a lot of. So thank you, Rebecca, for joining us. We really appreciate the time. In the weeks to come, we've got some really good episodes. The next one is going to have Kate Fry, one of the writers from Stranger Things. That was a lot of fun to talk to Kate. She is wonderful. And then after that, we're going to have our 100th episode special. So we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff, and we're going to get together and do this one in person, the four of us. So join us for that one. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then after that, we have Robert Silverberg. The legendary Robert Silverberg. We just really enjoyed having him on the show. He's such an interesting person to talk to and knows so much history about just the science fiction genre in general. So please join us for that. As usual, if you have not followed the show or rated the show or left a comment or just shared the show with one of your friends, let people know if you think they would enjoy what we do here. We'd really appreciate it. We love talking to science fiction authors and filmmakers and writers of all kinds. Because we just love talking about geeky stuff like fantasy and science fiction. So please let us know what you think of the show. Write a review, follow us, subscribe, whatever you got to do. Let us know because we want to know you're out there, and we really appreciate you listening today. Thank you so much. All right, well, everyone's waiting for us. Let's make our way over to the bridge.
Today on the show, we have Rebecca Thorne. She is a best-selling author of Badass Lesbians, an educator who is passionate about the publishing industry, and our guest today. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. I only join the podcast when there's an author that I want to talk to, which...
Oh my gosh, that makes me so happy. Now I feel really flattered.
We are lucky enough to have you on our show today because you're on your book tour for your re-release of Can't Spell Treason Without T. Is there anything different that's happening with the re-release than the self-published edition? Do you have extra stories?
Oh my God, so many things. So when I self-published, it was very quiet, I would say, and it wasn't even that quiet because Book Talk really took my book and ran with it. Like, I felt like when I self-published, I had this amazingly fantastic, unique experience where everybody was so excited from day one to read this book. And I'd been promoting it all summer long while I was writing it. And then I put up the advanced reader copies for it. And in the span of like 24 hours, I had like 150 people. For a no-name author like me, like, I'd published a book before, but no one read it, like no one even knows what my debut was. Like, and I got the rights to that back, and it was called The Secrets of Star Whales, but I'm going to be republishing it on my own, I think. But like, no one knew who I was, so the fact that I had 150 random people like super excited to read the intro to this book was very, very flattering to me. And from the day that it was released, I never had a zero day. Like, I sold books every single day that this book was in my care, which was wonderful. So, but after it was picked up by a big publisher, I had spent enough time, like I spent the last 8 years in traditional publishing, trying to get my books sold to a big publisher, going with my literary agent to sell these. I mean, I pitched probably 7 books over 8 years, and all of them but one were shot down. And then the one that did get published was published at a small press. Like, it wasn't really anything big. So this experience with Tor has been wildly different than anything that I've experienced in the past, even though I had so much experience in traditional publishing. So we had, Tor, really, we had 2 other presses that were interested, one in the US and one in the UK, that were interested in buying it in January of 2023. And I self-published the book in September of 2022. So it really didn't take that long for it to start getting waves. And once these publishers jumped on board, I connected with a literary agent through complete happenstance that ended up negotiating these great deals first with the UK and then with the US. And from that point on, Tor has just been treating me like I feel like I'm a celebrity, which is crazy because I mean, like, I'm just like this little writer in Arizona who just like does her own thing and like just wanted to publish for fun, But I mean, like, literally, like, they're sending me on this crazy book tour. They have organized all of these podcast interviews. I've gotten article requests. I've gotten emails from people I would never have even expected. Like I just got an email in my inbox today that said that they wanted to work with me to host a writing retreat. And I would be like the head of the writing retreat. And I'm just like, what? So like it's just been night and day from anything I've experienced before, but I wouldn't say it's better or worse. Like the indie experience was really, really wonderful. And I still publish my books with indie publishing. If I don't have a publisher lined up for them, I'll just publish them myself. And I think that's wonderful too. So I don't know. There's no bad or good. It's just wonderful.
That's really exciting. And you put 8 years of work to get to the celebrity status.
Yeah,
so it was well earned.
It was definitely not an overnight success. So a lot of people I think might see me and think that, but that was not the case. I've been around forever. So
you have special editions for Can't Spell Treason Without T. Is it just in the UK or?
Yeah, so the UK, and they're actually both sold out.
Oh, already? So we don't need to promote it.
I don't know what happened. I'm honestly shocked. Yeah, I had 3,000 signed copies for Waterstones. They arranged a special edition with the sprayed edges, with the normal cover for the UK. And that sold out probably about 2 weeks ago. So now you can say, notify me if one comes available, but they're gone. And then I had my publisher did the purple copies. Like I'm pointing, you can't tell, but I'm pointing to the purple copy on my bookshelf. They did that as a special like advanced reader copy release. If you got the purple copy, you were an advanced reader, and it was supposed to be a very special thing, but they had to choose the color purple. And like, I don't know if you know any purple people, like everyone else is just like, oh yeah, I like blue, I like red, I like green. And then there's purple people, and like everything that they are is purple. Like they have purple bedding, they have purple backpacks, they have purple clothes, they have purple jewelry, right? Like, so they made it purple, and all of these purple people start flooding my inbox. And I know this because my sister is a purple person. Like she lost her mind. So all these people started flooding my inbox saying, where can I get the purple one? And I'm like, you can't, it's not available. But then the Broken Binding must have gotten in touch with my publisher after I told them that, and they arranged for a purple copy. And that one sold out in 3 days. It was 500 copies, and they were gone. So,
that's
purple
incredible.
People, man, they're crazy. I mean, I say that in the most loving way. If you're a purple person, know I love you, but like, I'm not a purple person. I don't understand.
If any of our listeners haven't read it yet, what's your like elevator pitch for it?
So Can't Spell Treason Without T is about two badass lesbians who leave their intense fantasy lives to go and open up a bookshop that serves tea. And that's the plot. Like they have to leave. One of them is a Queen's Guard. She has to leave her intense job as a guard of the Queen, and the Queen is not very happy with that. So she leaves and just goes. And so the Queen is hunting her down. The other one is the most powerful mage in the world, like the most powerful mage. And so she has a lot of responsibilities tied to that she can't really abandon, but they both decide to do it anyway. And it's just kind of a question of how that all pans out. Mm-hmm. The second book is about them. Basically, they go in search of these dragon eggs, and they end up finding this pirate and this constable who are also women who have been like friends, and then they were enemies, and now they're possibly going into lovers kind of situation. And so they basically play matchmaker for these like other couple, as like the constable is trying to catch the pirate's trying to flee the constable, and then Keith and Raina are just there like causing problems the whole time to try and get that couple together. And then books 3 and 4 are not really released, not really talked about, but book 3 is going to be about a wedding and a coup. And book 4 is about alchemy and tourist traps, like gentrification of a city. So there's a lot of, like obviously their bookstore becomes very popular, and I kind of delve into how that affects Tawny, their cute little town. So
are there more lesbians in those books?
There aren't, but there is an ace character in book 3, which I love. And then we do get to see a little bit of a romance between the Diarn and the Lord in book 1. So Feo and Wylan, they have like this on again, off again kind of thing, and like they're on again in books 3 and 4. So it's got a lot of representation, but no, I didn't add. Everybody asked if I like doubled the lesbians in every subsequent book, and I'm like, that would be a lot of lesbians.
That would be, but I only asked because it's been the marketing for the second book.
Yeah.
We're doubling them for the
Yeah,
negative reviews.
I got annoyed that someone gave, I mean, 3 people gave me 1-star review. I don't even know if those reviews are still up. I feel like they might have heard about it and took them down, but 3 people gave me 1-star reviews because the first book had lesbians, not because the book was bad, not anything about the writing. The book had lesbians and they gave me 1-star reviews. And I'm like, can you imagine doing that on like a hetero book? Like 1 star, male, female couple. Like, I don't know. It's just as weird to me.
That's the world we're in these days, unfortunately. Yeah.
It's weird.
That's
It's
crazy.
just weird.
We spoke a little earlier about how fantasy, modern fantasy, has been quite different from traditional fantasy and Middle Earth, and maybe some of the places, traditional places that I think some of us started fantasy, and as a Gen Xer, that was my gateway in there. But you fall under a couple genres that I'm not sure if they're self-titled or if this is a broader thing happening within the fantasy scene. But you can't spell treason without T. That quartet falls under cozy fantasy, and actually, yeah. I've only recently heard of that. And then you also write science fantasy and contemporary fantasy. And I was wondering if you could sort of introduce us to what that means and what those genres within fantasy are and represent.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's a great question too. I think it's fascinating to see how fantasy can touch every avenue of writing. Essentially, like any genre can be fantasy. And I think that's, the general definition I would say is there magic? Is there wonder? Is there creatures that we don't see normally? Are there beings that we can experience that are not normally experienced? So when it comes to cozy fantasy, that genre is honestly shocking to me because when I was like, I've been in the traditional publishing space for ages, and all I ever heard for the last 8 years was amp up the stakes, amp up the stakes, amp up the stakes, make them more intense, give me more life or death, give me more wars, more espionage, more political intrigue. And I just was like, I was so tired. It's like, I just want to write something fun and lighthearted, like Good Omens style, right? Like, yeah, the end of the world is there, but like, they're not really following it. Like, it's just kind of like in the background as they're doing their own thing. And cozy fantasy came about as Legends and Lattes. That was the first book that really kind of created the genre. And Travis Baldree advertised it as high fantasy with low stakes. And that catchphrase was so accessible to people, especially after the pandemic, when we all needed something lighter, right? Like, we all didn't want the heavy world ending. Like, look around, our world is awful sometimes, not all the time, but like, there's enough to look at that we want more of that escape in our fiction. So when he pitched that, high fantasy with low stakes, it was very easy for publishers in a mainstream level to latch onto that genre and say, well, where are the books like this? And the minute the minute that book created the genre, it gave books like mine the opportunity to come in and basically be sold to publishers with that genre. Because when you're selling to a traditional publisher, they're not going to be interested in your book unless you can comp it with something else. So if you're saying this book is like this book, it's like this book. And that's what Legends and Lattes did for the cozy fantasy genre. It created this book is like Legends and Lattes. And Legends and Lattes was a New York Times bestseller immediately. So now every publisher under the sun is like, well, where's my Legends and Lattes? I need a book like Legends and Lattes. So I was able to write that book quickly and get it out in a fast enough period of time that I was able to be one of the ones mentioned in the same breath, very much like Hunger Games and Divergent style, but like not, In regards to the other genres, like science fantasy, contemporary fantasy, it's all just different flavors of what we know and love, So like, there are readers who can't really wrap their brains around a true fantasy world, but they love reading about our world with dragons. Like, those readers need books. And then there's readers who really love the technical science of, science fiction, but they don't want it set in space. They maybe want it set in like a kind of more creative world that is a little bit scientific, but not space, which has its own set of rules and laws and vacuums and everything else. So I think that when you're looking at all of these different subgenres of fantasy, you can really start to look at the readers who are consuming them and see that there's a desire for all of those different genres.
Oh, that's a fantastic explanation. I think, and I was sort of, when I heard cozy fantasy, I was like, oh, like, in the same sense that like Becky Chambers would be cozy sci-fi, right? Like,
yeah. So once the cozy fantasy genre came in, cozy sci-fi was like, well, what's the cozy sci-fi? And Becky Chambers is top of the list. I mean, like, she is probably the main mover of cozy sci-fi, and it still hasn't really taken hold, but I'm giving it like 3 to 4 years. Like I think in the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to see a lot of cozy sci-fi, and they'll be using Becky Chambers as a comp in that way. I would say even probably Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy might even be cozy. Like that's a very funny, witty, classic book that could very easily fit into this new genre as it starts to take form.
Where do you think it goes? Like, do you think? Do you have predictions for say cozy fantasy? Or
I think it's going to get. Here's what I think. I think that when it first came out, the establishing a shop, and I say this with irony because that's literally what I wrote, right? They establish a bookshop that serves tea. And this was before Bookshops and Bone Dust even came out. Like I did not know that book was coming out when I wrote Treason and Tea, right? Like, and then he does one with the bookshop and I'm like, oh crap, right? When the establishing the shop became the genre convention, and now I think we're seeing already people are tired of it. They don't want cozy fantasy where they're establishing a shop. We're like, okay, we've been there, we've done that, we've seen it. What else do you have? And that's why I broke away from the shop in books 2, 3, and 4 and focused more on, like, oh, this pirate on this river. Cause like who's ever heard of river pirates, right? Like that's weird, And then in the next one, it's like, oh my gosh, there's dragons and a wedding and a coup. And like, how does that pan out? And then the fourth book is just kind of like, okay, what plot lines did I leave open? How can I wrap those up in a very satisfying way with the magic of this world? So I think that allowing cozy fantasy to develop in an organic way, separating itself from the template that created it, I think that's what we're going to need to start to see moving forward, because I feel like readers are going to get very tired of the shop convention very quickly.
Having written in so many different genres, do you have a favorite? Are you finding yourself specializing, or are you still happy to like wander?
I kind of love straddling everything, to be honest. Like I wrote my science fantasy. It's got like very thriller-esque. It's like The Last of Us meets the Titanic, right? Like I wrote that because I wrote 2 cozy fantasies in a row and they were very happy and mild and chill. And I was like, okay, now I need some gore. Like now I need some like angst and anguish and intrigue and mystery and thriller. Like give me all of that and then bring me back to the cozy as a way to like calm myself down for a bit. So I wrote 2 cozies, I wrote that thriller, and then I wrote the other 2 cozies, and now I'm writing the next thriller. So I kind of like bouncing between the high stakes and low stakes to see where I'm feeling that day.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in and ask too, because like Sam, the genre is new to me, and I think it sounds delightful. The whole idea, because you're right, we all need a little happy, mild, and chill, as you just described. But is there, and I know the genre is really just developing. It's sort of it's in a bit of an embryonic state, or maybe a toddler state at this point. But
Yeah.
do you have a checklist or rules of thumb when you're writing a cozy book of how that's going to affect this world, and how your characters will? I mean, again, you just summed it up nicely with happy, mild, and chill, but how does that then reflect on your dragons, say, or the magic in the world? Does the overarching sort of feel affect those traditional elements in any way?
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. Like, you've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune in to 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
I would definitely say so. And I will admit that I pushed the boundaries of what I think people thought cozy fantasy could be when I wrote that book. And I did that very intentionally, because as much as I loved Legends and Lattes, I would get so bored if that was the book I was reading over and over and over. Like that specific book I loved. But when there's low stakes, I'm ADHD to the max, right? Like I got to have some action. I got to have some intrigue. I want to have like the conventions of plot that I'm used to inside a book that makes me feel like a warm hug. So that was what my goal was I was trying to add, like, if you give, this woman who is a true master swordsman, and then you put her in this tiny town, like, she's got to fight somebody at some point, right? Like, she has the skill set, like, that's what she's from, and then you get this mage, she's the most powerful mage in the world. She's got to use her magic somewhere, right? Like, you can't just have her have that ability and then have her be like, JK, it's not a part of me anymore. So bringing those mild conflicts into my book over many chapters, supplemented with a lot of the kind of quieter, cozy moments that you would expect in a cozy fantasy, was how I found that balance. So like, there is a period in the halfway point of that book where they do fight an armada of dragons. Like, the dragons come to burn their town and they have to stop the dragons from killing everybody. And that is not cozy. But then at the end of it, after the dragons are done and the character is injured and they have to like recover as a community, then you get to see kind of like the thing that you see after, like a hurricane blows through town, right? Like, you see the most intimate community after trauma. So bringing in that moment of found family where everybody is coming together and they're leaving, flowers for this mage who just almost died to protect them, like, that's very cozy, that's very heartfelt. And that was a very easy way for me to balance those two genre conventions. So I don't know. I think everybody's going to be able to find their own balance there, but that lent very well for me. Like, my writing style leans into that very well. And I was very happy to be able to tackle it. So it was nice to have permission to do something cozy with low stakes. But then I was also like, but I like my stakes sometimes. Like,
I think you did, as a reader of cozy fantasy, I enjoy that, but yours has some more conflict than a lot of them. But you're guaranteed at the beginning and that you're going to be safe and it's going to work out okay. Like, there's not many books that start in the beginning pages saying there's going to be a happy ending, it'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine. Yeah, I think that's important. I think that when readers pick up a book, they're not, especially from an author they've never read before, they're not sure what they're going to get or whether or not it will be worth their time. So I wanted to make sure that these cozy readers know that even though it might get tense and heart pounding at some point, I'll resolve it in a couple of chapters. Just give me some time and they will be sitting together having a cup of tea by the fire before you know it.
And you write characters, I think you're very good at writing characters, even the characters that are unlikable and written to be unlikable, like darn Theo. I still want them to be okay, even though I think that they're kind of annoying, right?
Yeah.
and you can tell that all...
I think if I had to pick one character in that entire series, it would be Theo. They're such a jerk.
They are awful, but I still want them to succeed.
I love them so much. I think that they're just like unapologetically awful, and that's why I love them so much. Like, they know exactly who they are and what they want, and they will not take anything less than that. And I think there's something so beautiful about that kind of mindset when you're going in towards the world. So
do you enjoy writing the unlikable characters, or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm one of those people that, like, one of the things I love analyzing, and like, if you've read my contemporary fantasy, you'll know that, like, I love analyzing shades of gray in a world of black and white. Like, if someone says it's this way or it's this way, my favorite thing is to dive into the characters that are right down the middle and find out whether or not they are actually that way, or if there's a whole different path that these people are not seeing. I think that's so interesting to look at the way that our world works, because so very rarely is something black or white. It's almost always a shade of gray. So yeah, I love those characters. I dive into it. I mean, they can do the worst things ever, and like, I will still dive into them and be like, let's figure it out.
So I'm interested how you create those characters. Are you the kind of author that plots out their whole character and writes their whole story, or do you just kind of follow them on the journey? And
I kind of vibe with them. Like I know that, in Can't Spell Treason Without Tea, a lot of people disliked Queen Tulane. And I completely see why. Like, I can see from a distance that she is probably pretty one-dimensional to a lot of people. But to me, I'm like, I've known narcissists like this, like, and they are that one-dimensional in real life. Like, when I look at someone who acts this way, who thinks they're the world, like you meet those people and they truly do feel that way. And like in later books, I dive into more of why they got that way and how they got that way. And that's that shade of gray to me. But sometimes when you meet a villain, they are just that way. Like you can't go in and tell them to not be that way because they don't know how else to be. So I don't know. I think for a lot of the villains that I meet, I have an idea of who I need to oppose the main character, like what kind of conflict do I need in this book? And then I create a character that comes about because of that need of conflict. And then the rest of it just kind of falls into place based on the world building, the history, the way the characters are interacting with them, and how that all kind of pans out.
So you are an educator as well as an author. So you talk about the 5-sentence method when you're talking to authors. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I wouldn't even say like I didn't create this, but I do think that I'm probably one of the people to like verbalize it in a way that makes it easy for others to understand. The 3-act structure of a novel is how every modern Western fiction pans out. Like whether or not you realize it, like everything follows the 3-act structure. And there's a very basic understanding in a reader's brain that if it doesn't follow that structure and hit those points exactly, it's wrong and they don't know why. And it's because we've been trained over many, many years to read this kind of structure. And if it doesn't follow that structure, we're like, oh no, it's bad. Right. And I always kind of explain it like in that book, it's a little gruesome, but it's like the 3-act structure is the skeleton of your story. And you can still add the skin and the organs and the facial features, and those will all be completely different from what you're looking at. But if it doesn't look human, it's going to be unsettling for people and they don't know why. So with the 5-sentence method, it basically just identifies the plot points in 5 different periods of your novel. So the 5% mark, the 25% mark, the 50% mark, the 75% mark, and the 95% mark. And it identifies plot points that are supposed to happen at exactly that time in the story. And then it helps break down the word count of your book to identify exactly where that needs to happen in your story and what that plot point entails to basically play into the psychology that your readers are expecting.
Do you use that every time you write? Is that how you're able to write so fast? Because I know you
every time. Yeah.
Every time.
I use the 5-sentence method. Sometimes I plot a little more, but I never plot less. And then I always write a query letter because I spent so long in traditional publishing that for every book that I write, I have to write they call it query letter. It's basically a summary, like a 3-paragraph summary of your book that you would hand to a literary agent to ask them to represent your book. And I think that they're like query letters, when they're done well, are done incredibly well. They tell the theme, they tell the stakes, they tell the character growth, they tell the love interest arc, they tell the background setting, they tell everything about your book if they're done well. So I write a query letter for every book that I write, even though I don't need to query anymore. And then that query letter gives me my overall snapshot of what I want this book to be tone-wise. And then my 5 sentences give me like the nitty-gritty, here's exactly what the plot points need to be to move forward through the story.
I feel like I need to go on and order that book right now. My and this is probably too personal. My wife is actually writing her first book right now, and
good for her! Good for her!
It's a rom-com. Thank you. I will, and she
awesome.
is she has been aspiring to do it for years and years and years, and she's doing the whole 5 a.m. authors or writers club,
Gosh,
and she's
her.
done her first draft, but it's that second round edit that is killing her.
Yeah.
And
If
it
she's
does,
writing a
right?
rom-com, have her pick up the 5-sentence method may help, but have her pick up the book called Romancing the Beat. That book is like the gospel for writing romance. Like if you're right, because like romance is it has like its own, like with fantasy you have a little bit of leeway with the sentences, like you can change them around depending on what you need. Romance is not that way. Like people who read romance need certain beats at certain periods of time, so it's best to get a romance specific book that can go in and identify those beats. So Romancing the Beat is the best craft book for romance, hands down.
Good tip. Good tip. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how much do you find now too that you and sorry to Miranda, just to jump in on that whole structure thing, because I'm a TV producer, like documentary kind of stuff, and so
Cool.
structure plays a role in that as well too. But it's always been that sort of, there's been a push pull between structure and creative expression. Like how much do you find that are you able to sort of cognitively set the structure aside now, or is it still very much the template that you go by and then you fill in the creative?
Yeah, so it depends on the book that I'm writing. So I've mentioned the contemporary fantasy. It's called The Day Death Stopped. And for anybody interested in a little more of a weird story structure, I highly recommend that book of mine because, like the other ones, I very much fell into what the readers expect. It's more for mainstream audiences. But then you get into The Day Death Stopped, and it's very written in Good Omen style. It's got an omniscient narrator, it's got footnotes, it's got very snarky, narration. Voice, if you listen to the audiobook, it's voiced by Moira Quirk, and like she's one of my favorite narrators. I couldn't believe I got her. It's so good. The audiobook is so good. But that story actually has 3 different timelines: the past, the present, and the future. And the future timeline is told in reverse. So the first chapter is the literal end of the world, and then you work back from there, alternating all of these different chapters to figure out how that happened. And it's just this very like comprehensive story of like the past, present, and future and how they all kind of tie together. And for that one, I actually had like the typical rom-com storyline with one of the timelines. Like the present timeline was like the romance timeline, right? And then like the past one was like the adventure timeline that like it follows the rising action, peak at 90%, falling action, right? And then we had this like other timeline that was told exactly in reverse, where it's like it starts high and ends low, and then the other one starts low and ends high. And like I had charts, and like I had a whiteboard with like string attached to it. Like it was so intense. And it was mostly just to see if I could, I was curious to know if I could tell a good story in a way that was unconventional. And I think that's kind of where the creativity comes in. Like you get these authors that once they understand the basic story structure, they can go on and do these amazing things in fiction. But you have to know the basics first. Like you can't build off blocks that aren't there. So I think that it's helpful to go back and forth between the two. And if I ever feel like I want to try something new, I know I'm able to, but I will say it was nice to go back to the conventional story structure because it takes a lot less time and effort. Like that book took me 3 years, and otherwise I can write a book in 10 days. So it just kind of depends on what I'm doing at the time. So
Wow, amazing. Well, and while we're on the topic, can you tell us a bit about the story if you can? Because the title is certainly intriguing. If you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit of the storyline and what we can expect when we open the book.
yeah. So The Day Death Stopped is about a very egotistical, self-centered witch named Claire. And all her life, she has been told that she is not allowed to achieve her quote unquote destiny, which is shared with another witch named Osiric. And the two of them together have all of this immense magical power, like avatar-like power, in a world where witches are just people with one weird ability. So they may, like one of the characters has the ability to find the prettiest rock anywhere he goes, right? Like that's his magical ability. Like another one, can pick the perfect watermelon, right? Like they have like these really weird abilities that don't really help or change anything in their day-to-day life. And then there's this witch who basically is like a pope that leads all of them. And that witch can do everything you'd imagine a witch could do, right? Like they can move mountains, they can persuade minds, they can do anything. So Claire and Osiric share that magic together, but there's only ever supposed to be one. And Osiric was chosen first. He was seen first. So he was given the ability before they knew Claire existed with all this same magic. He was given the ability to become the next pope. And so Claire has kind of had to find her way in this world, in a world that basically didn't know she existed. She was kind of forced to find her way anyway. So she becomes a stage magician in Las Vegas, and she's the best stage magician Las Vegas has ever seen because she has all this insane magic. But then there comes a question of whether or not she's able to continue doing that job, or if she needs to basically rise into the future she should have had all the time. Like she should have had the chance to become the Pope witch, and she didn't get that chance. So the book kind of examines that moment of whether or not she can choose her own fate, or if destiny is really a thing. So
I just you mentioned this a little earlier, and I noticed in your website you mentioned as well that you consider ADHD your superpower when it comes to writing. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I mean it's a double-edged sword. The ADHD is like I can get distracted with TikTok, and I'm scrolling for an hour and a half without even realizing that an hour and a half passed by. But if I'm careful about guiding my brain in the right direction, I can sit for 10 hours and churn out 10,000 words. You know, I mean, I can literally write a book. Like I wrote a book in 10 days because I just sat down and was like, okay. And I did the body doubling thing that ADHD people love to do, where you I put on a live stream with my TikTok, and I just knew the readers were there watching me write. And I was like, oh, I better not get distracted because there's people watching me, and I better make sure that I'm doing what they're expecting I'm going to do. So that kind of helped me counteract that ADHD mindset a little bit. But yeah, I think it's just I'm all over the place until the moment that I sit myself down and be like, okay, now is the moment that you're going to do the thing. And then I'm able to just take off like a shot in a way that I feel like neurotypical people might not be able to.
So you live streamed yourself writing that book for 10 days.
Yeah, I did it for 6 days straight, and then I finished it up on my own. But no, I literally I was live streaming for like 6 hours a day. And then I was just kind of tallying up. Like I'd stop every once in a while. I'd write for an hour, and then I'd take a 10-minute break, and I'd answer questions and stuff on the live, and then I'd be like, okay, let's go again. And then everybody was using it as their own body doubling option, because they were all pulling out their own work, and they're like, oh well, if Rebecca Thorne is working, I better work too, you know. And they're all kind of bouncing between. So it ended up being very beneficial for most of the people who tuned in. But yeah.
What a creative way to use social media, right? Like it's
yeah, I feel like I use social media in a way that is not typical. I use it as my personal think tank. Like I basically, any idea that I have, I just make a video about it. And I'm like, what do you guys think? Do you want to read this? And people are just like, yes, no. Like they jump in and they give me all their opinions. I feel like corporations would pay for the kind of engagement that I get on my videos with the stupid ass questions that I have. Like, I don't feel like there are any good questions, but I'm just like, what do you think about this? And people just like jump on it. They love it. So
the book talk community is an especially strong force. Like that's what they really championed your book as well, right?
Yeah, they did. I would not be anywhere without them. I just without the influencers that picked my book up when I was a nobody, and the readers that I have that have been following me from day one, I would not be anywhere without them. Like I love my publisher, but they didn't come in from the beginning. Like they were there after the book sold. But the only reason it sold is because of these amazing people I got to meet online who liked me and liked my book enough that they were excited. And one of the things that I actually do think is very interesting about social media coming forward is that with the invention of AI and the way that anything can be fabricated at any time, you know, books can be created with the touch of a button, or videos even of people. People right now are looking for authenticity. They're looking for someone that they can connect with and become quote unquote friends with, even if all they do is watch their video and they're, oh, I love them. Like that authenticity is something that can't be bought right now. And I think that that's what we're going to start to see moving forward with a lot of authors, is that people aren't going to trust them unless they're either an established name or they have an established platform, because that's how they know who to root for. You know, like that's how they know that they're not writing their books with AI, because I sat for 6 hours and did write-ins with these people. You know, like they know that I'm writing these books on my own, and they felt like they were a part of the experience. So when that book comes up for sale, everybody was like, oh my God, I can't wait to buy it, you know?
Yeah, it's a really special connection between authors and their readers that prior to social media, everyone knew what an actor looked like, but you couldn't really put a face to that many authors unless you were checking the book jacket. So there's more connection happening there. I think that's really special. And you use it to talk about your books, and you use it as a think tank. You were asking about a cozy sci-fi. You were asking for ideas. So what people expected from a cozy sci-fi. So is that where you're planning on jumping next?
I have a great idea for and honestly, the thing that surprised me about that, because I went in and I said, what tropes do you want to see in cozy sci-fi? Like if the cozy sci-fi was going to be a thing in earnest, what do you want to see? And one of the top ones was solar punk, right? Like solar, like they all want to see the hope of a restorable, sustainable future. You know, they want to see that. But then the other thing that kind of took me by surprise, because all I've ever heard in traditional publishing is aliens don't sell. Everybody wanted aliens. I was amazed. They're all, but they specifically, they wanted humans are space orcs. that trope, right? Like the idea that like humans are weird in the concept of greater space because we do these little things in our own society. So like if you type in like in Tumblr, humans are space orcs, you're going to see just like post after post after post of like, how weird is it that we have pets? Like, what if this alien species doesn't understand the concept of pets and we're over here fawning over this amazing little dog that we have, and like this dog is a part of our family, and these aliens are just like, but it's a animal. You know, like that would be very weird to an alien. So that was honestly very surprising to me, and that was something that I learned from TikTok. I didn't expect aliens would be so desperately wanted, but they are. So when I write my cozy sci-fi, absolutely I'm going to be including aliens, because I didn't know that that was a thing, but now I do. So
Cute ones, right?
yeah, cute ones, yeah. Or really fierce ones that have very cute personalities, because I like that dichotomy.
That's still cute.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to ask, and this is sort of a more broad question as well, too, that maybe should have come at the beginning, but here it is. What do you find, you know, as far as the genres go, you know, say sci-fi and fantasy, where have you found your inspiration? You know, who have you enjoyed in the past? Who have you, you know, been inspired to write by? And what are you enjoying now, both writing wise, both, you know, novels and other media, you know, TV or films? What, you know, what's turning your crank these days?
That's a great question. I would say if I had to pick, like, and I pick these same ones all the time. Allie Carter, her writing style when I was a teenager shaped drastically the way that I write. And I haven't read many of her adult things, but like I was obsessed with her "I Tell You I Love You, but then I'd have to kill you" series of spies. Like they're like spy young adult books. I loved the way that her action felt very approachable. It was very quick and like fast paced, but very visual and cinematic. Her writing style was very fast paced. Her dialogue was very witty. All of those things were really inspiring to me, because I remember reading those books in a day, and all these other books would take me weeks, right? Like, and I would read her books in a day. And I was like, that's the kind of author I want to be. I want to be the one who writes books that people can read in a day, you know, because they can't put them down. And then I would say, as far as like series goes, like I wrote a quartet because of Tamara Pierce, you know, like Tamara Pierce's stuff was hugely inspirational to me. Like, how often do you get to see a kid getting their period on page, right? Like, that was crazy. That was not something that we got to see. And I just feel like she did such a good job of making these really powerful female characters that just came into their own, even in a world that didn't accept that. And that was very inspirational to me. So I would say those two are probably my most influential authors growing up. I've read a lot of books that I've loved since, but those ones definitely shaped. Like, I always wanted to write a quartet. The fact that Tor has given me the ability to do it makes me so happy in my soul, because all I've ever wanted to do is be like Tamara Pierce. So, in regards to what I'm reading now, I'm reading a bunch of blurbs. I have a bunch of books that publishers have reached out to me to give like blurbs for. So I wouldn't say that I've chosen any of the ones that I'm reading recently, but they're all very, very good. Like, I'm no regrets. But I think the next one I'll start on my own is probably A Tempest of Tea, because I've heard amazing things about that book, and I cannot wait for vampires in a tea house in like the 1920s. I think that sounds so cool. So
we've really taken up a ton of your time here, and we really do appreciate it. So is there a just tell us where people can find your books, and what they can look forward to in the near future from you?
I mean, my cozy fantasies are going to be everywhere, so that's really cool. I mean, the odds of that happening are crazy slim. So that's exciting. If you have the ability, buy one in an airport bookstore, because I'm a flight attendant in real life, and I've been a flight attendant for a decade. And like, there's something very like primal about the idea that my book might be in an airport bookstore. So if you have them and you get onto a Southwest Airlines flight, wave them around in case I'm your flight attendant, so that I can come in and see them and be like, oh my God, and then sign your book, because I think that'd be so fun. As far as my other books, you can find all of them on Amazon. You can request any of them from your indie bookstores. I have all of them available through those channels. But you may have to request the indie ones through your bookstore. They probably aren't just sitting there. But Amazon is the place that I make, as sad as it is, Amazon is where I make the most money. So
And they can follow you on TikTok and Instagram.
Yep, TikTok, Instagram. I'm on Threads sometimes. I have a website. I have a Discord. All of it's available on my Linktree. So,
great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It was so wonderful to talk to you all.
Thank you. It was so
pleasure.
great to meet you, and I am so excited for the rest of the books to come out. And thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, thank you so much.
Exciting for me and everyone else, but I'm tired.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed that one. Remember, we got a lot of episodes coming up. 100 episode special, Kate Trefry from Stranger Things, Robert Silverberg, and so much more in the future. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to the show, like the show, email us, let us know what you think of the show, tell a friend, all that stuff. Thank you so much. Until next time.